What up, cuckolds? It's your boy, the Hater, up in this piece. And it's time for an episode of Hater Outdoors up in this mug. My nose is a little bit stuffed and I've been outside for a while, so I haven't been able to blow my nose. So sorry if I sound a little off. I feel perfectly fine. Just gotta blow my nose, cucks. You know how that goes. So let's get to our Raw review. Now, I hate to say this, but this was a pretty good episode of Raw, right? The Hater keeps it real, keeps it 100 all the time, and this time is no different. This was a pretty good episode, so let's just get to it, segment by segment. There was obviously a lot of bad things too, but overall I enjoyed this. First up, Gunther comes out and bores everyone to death with a promo about how he's better than everybody. First of all, no, he isn't. Secondly, the fans predictably start chanting, "You deserve it," right? And it's like, how does he deserve it? He didn't win fair and square, right? It's like Damian Priest had him beat, and Finn Balor screwed Damian Priest. So this idea that somehow Gunther is this deserving champion just doesn't make any sense. Orton then comes out. Wasn't he in SmackDown? Fine, all right. Once in a while we can tolerate this, but it's happening a lot, right? The brand split already makes no sense, but whatever. Orton comes out and his gripe is basically that Gunther didn't really pin him. As we talked about at King of the Ring, Gunther didn't pin Orton because Orton's shoulders were like a foot off the mat, right? This really shows how shitty Gunther is, and it really shows how shitty this entire match was. Nevertheless, we have to see it again because they're going to go and do it in Bash at Berlin. So obviously Gunther's going to win. He's going to beat Orton decisively, and they shake hands, right? I didn't like this segment at all because this is another like, oh, let's have a respectful match. This is Randy Orton, you know? What should have happened instead was headbutt, right? Punt to the head. That's what should have happened. But we didn't go with that. We went with this boring-ass match there. Ludwig Kaiser was also there. Not so much to be there with Gunther, but because his match was next. It was him versus Sheamus. I really enjoyed this match. The entire story of this match was, when will Pete Dunne come and hit Sheamus with the shillelagh? Well, Pete Dunne eventually came out, but he missed the shillelagh attack, and Sheamus hit the kneecap on him. They're not calling it the kneecap anymore, but basically it's like the bro kick, but with a knee strike, right? A bicycle knee lays out Pete Dunne. The move just looks devastating. He goes back to the ring and wrestles with Ludwig Kaiser a little bit longer. Ludwig goes for his finisher, which I call the Compass Rose because that's what one of the people from OVE, whatever, Ohio versus Everything, he had that same move. That's what he called it. Basically, it's the Velveteen Dream DDT thing, right? But Sheamus gets out of it, hits the kneecap, hits the bro kick, and pins him. This was a pretty good match for what it was. Ludwig Kaiser just doesn't belong in there with Sheamus, right? Like, Sheamus is a special wrestler, you know? He has this incredibly unique look and presentation that when he debuted in ECW, I was like, there's something here with this guy, you know? I didn't think he was going to be a main eventer at the time because, quite frankly, he was debuting in ECW and having a match with Goldust. But nevertheless, Sheamus is now obviously a bona fide Hall of Famer and a legend, right? He's definitely going to be in the Hall of Fame. And it's good to see him beat these jobbers, you know? Like, his feud with Pete Dunne is silly. Like, obviously, Sheamus is better, you know? Like, who cares? But anyways, something else happens, right? Right after this, I believe it was right after this, there's a segment between Adam Pearce, who is complete garbage in his role. Like, he was a decent wrestler back in the day, and he has the capabilities to play this role, but just the character of Adam Pearce is just so bad because he never does anything, right? He's just there. He always does like, he always mitigates damages after the fact, right? Shit goes down that he doesn't want to happen, and then it's always him trying to like tell people don't do this again. So he gets confronted by Bronson Reed, who actually, I thought this immediately. Bronson Reed cuts a pretty convincing, a very short, but a very convincing promo. Basically he says, look, what about my opportunities, right? And Adam Pearce is like, well, I already booked Ludwig Kaiser versus Sheamus, right? I guess Bronson Reed wanted to have a match against one of them. That was his big opportunity. But nevertheless, Bronson Reed says, look, okay, I see how it is down in this bitch, right? I have to make my own opportunities. I have to climb my own mountain. I have to follow my own path, right? And this is essentially an implicit threat of, now I'm going to take myself seriously. The only thing wrong with this promo was that Bronson Reed should have realized this 2 or 3 years ago, you know? Clearly, nobody gives a shit about Bronson Reed. And honestly, they need to do something to address this in kayfabe, right? Why is it that people like Bronson Reed never get opportunities, right? Why is it that Bronson Reed never gets a chance to have like a one-on-one match, right? He always gets like fed the scraps, right? And this is what Bronson Reed was hinting at. He's basically saying, I'm being held down, but look at me, right? And I will say this, even though I maintain that Bronson Reed is just another Bull Dempsey, right? He is entertaining. Like, he's got a very unique look, right? He literally is like a ball, right? He's big, he's athletic, and it's like he's too big to be this athletic. They say this about a lot of wrestlers, but it makes sense for someone like him. Like, for example, Samoa Joe is like half his size, and they say it about Samoa Joe. But Bronson Reed, this guy, like, he just has a gas tank, man. People that big shouldn't have this much cardio, but more on that later. Then we have a segment, basically, what's his face? Damian Priest comes out, and he basically says, Finn Balor, you screwed me, and I'm going to get you back, right? That's the long and short of it. Finn Balor appears like via Titantron and says, you know, you're going to fight JD McDonough instead, and I'm going to come at you when you forget about me, right? Then throughout the night, we see segments between JD McDonough and Damian Priest, right? The thing that mattered here was that now the new Judgment Day essentially is the same as the old Judgment Day, minus Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest, but plus Liv Morgan, right? All of these guys are in it together, right? The group has been manipulated. Now, I thought, especially after the JD McDonough vignette, that it would have been a nice little thing, a nice little surprise to make it that JD is the leader, right? Like, because one of the things that JD says is that Damian didn't want him in the Judgment Day because he knew that Finn would listen to JD more than he did to Damian, almost implying that he's the one that turned Finn, right? But this wasn't substantiated by what Finn Balor said. Basically, according to Finn Balor, right, a year ago, Finn Balor lost some title match. I don't remember this at all, but I don't care, right? And apparently on the car ride back, Damian Priest said, like, you know, man up, right? And since then, Finn Balor took it personally, and for 1 year, he's been biding his time, right? Okay, fine. You want to retcon it like that, even though during that 1 year, they were like a unified unit, right? During that year, they helped Rhea Ripley. They helped each other. They became tag team champions. And ultimately, Damian Priest became the world heavyweight champion. Nevertheless, this is the way they're going with it. And I'm perfectly fine. You know, like, it's fine. But, you know, like, what's the point of this feud? Like, Damian Priest is, like, he got a massive pop. He's definitely over. And quite frankly, I really like the direction they're going with Damian Priest. These last few weeks, he's been teetering the line in being a face, right? And this kind of solidifies it, you know? This solidifies it when he was telling Dominic basically like, hey, like, don't cheat on Rhea Ripley, right? The other members were playing video games, right? Which made it seem as if they were like lackadaisical about it, but it did show that Damian Priest cared about Rhea Ripley, right? Which is a very face, you know, tactic, right? So the seeds were planted, and Damian Priest is like a very rare instance of a big, scary guy, if you will. I mean, he still has those little eyeshadow moments, but maybe he'll tone them down now because now he doesn't have to be Judgment Day Damian Priest anymore, right? But he's this rare breed of big guy that does moves that are so cool that it makes more sense for him to be a face, right? Whereas Gunther can have a career where he's always a heel because he does boring moves. Damian Priest is going to do cool moves, and people will pop for these moves. And as a result, it just makes more sense. It fits him well to be a face. And quite frankly, we seldom see big guys, especially guys that big, be not only that athletic, but be faces, right? Generally speaking, the big guys are heels. So I really enjoyed that direction, right? Then we had a match. It was Shayna Baszler versus Lyra Valkyria. Long story short, Lyra Valkyria hits her finishing move, which is the cradle shock. She calls it the Nightwing, who gives a rat's ass, right? So she has Shayna Baszler beat. This just reminded me of when Shayna Baszler was making people tap out. Like, she made like 5 women tap out in the Elimination Chamber, only to lose to Becky Lynch at WrestleMania. But nevertheless, you know, Shayna Baszler's not in the same position anymore in the card, but she's basically beat. But the match ends with a DQ because the rest of the Sonya Deville group attack Lyra Valkyria. This leads to Damage Control coming in, right? And I'll just get this out of the way. Later on in the night, they attack Damage Control and they take out Dakota Kai, right? But this leads to a match between Io Sky versus Sonya Deville. And I thought that this was going to be like the return of Asuka, but nevertheless, it wasn't. And what's-her-face wins, right? Fucking Io Sky wins with the over the moonsault, which is garbage moonsault. She has like a shit moonsault, right? She's not like, her moonsault isn't good enough for it to be her finisher. Nevertheless, we move on to one of the main segments of the night, and in my opinion, the best segment of the night by far. CM Punk comes out and basically says he's here to wrestle now, right? He's tired of talking, he just wants to wrestle. And Seth Rollins comes out and they tease that they're gonna fight, right? At this point, Drew McIntyre shows up in the crowd and taunts CM Punk. Basically, he says, I'm better than you now, right? Okay, so if you're better than him, leave it at that. But he doesn't. He says, I have your bracelet, basically, right? CM Punk chases him to the back. And this ends this part of the segment. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins is left holding his balls in the ring. So I'm like, all right, maybe Seth Rollins will cut a promo. He turns around and he gets ho-trained by Bronson Reed, motherfucks. Remember him? Bronson Reed ho-trains him, right? And then starts beating on him. Seth Rollins gets a few super kicks in, but ultimately this leads to nothing as Bronson Reed picks him up and hits the Death Valley driver on his bitch ass. At this point, Bronson Reed climbs up and does the tsunami on him, right? Then he gets up and does it again. Then he gets up and does it again. At this point, like, fucking Jason Jordan is there. Kenny Dykstra, remember him from Spirit Squad? Apparently he works there too now. I think I knew that already, but I forgot it. So it was nice to see him. They come there and they do like the standard, Adam Pearce thing where like, don't do this, they don't actually interfere. Don't do this, right? But this is understandable because Bronson Reed is a big motherfucker. So long story short, throughout this entire segment, Bronson Reed does, I believe, 7 tsunamis on Seth Rollins, right? And he wants to do more, but they're pretty much rolling Seth Rollins out of the ring. If there ever was a time to have like a blood capsule in Seth Rollins' mouth to sell the tsunamis, this was it. But this was an awesome moment, right? This was an Attitude Era moment. This reminded me even a little bit of the Mark Henry Hall of Pain, where one day something snapped and Mark Henry decided to take himself seriously and he started whooping ass. Now, this is not going to lead to anything for Bronson Reed, realistically, right? I don't see him beating Seth Rollins, but I hope he does, right? This could be a moment where you're making a star, right? Because Bronson Reed, all of a sudden now, just with one segment, he elevates himself to a believable upper mid-carder, right? Now, Bronson Reed, if he has a legit program with Seth Rollins, he is elevated in the card above the likes of Sami Zayn, right? So if his push goes well, in 2 months, you could see a Raw match, Sami Zayn versus Bronson Reed, and Bronson Reed should be expected to win that match in almost a squash match-like fashion, right? This was pretty great. Next up, we see a little promo cut by Karrion Kross. It's the same shit. Basically, he says Xavier Woods is the inferior one when it comes to him and Kofi, and Karrion Kross has given Xavier opportunities. Not the kind of opportunities that Karrion Kross has gotten, because Karrion Kross has gotten no opportunities. He makes sure to throw that in, right? But first of all, this is ridiculous because he's like, that's sad. No, it isn't sad, right? Someone has to be the Jannetty and someone has to be the Shawn Michaels. Kofi Kingston has had the better career, right? But Xavier Woods has had a much better career than Karrion Kross, than AOP, than Scarlett, and Paul Ellering as well, right? Xavier Woods is one of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time now because he's like an 11-time tag team champion. So he's had a Hall of Fame career. Like, Xavier Woods is going to be in the Hall of Fame as part of New Day 100%, right? So Karrion Kross basically saying that you haven't had a good career is ridiculous because Karrion Kross is Karrion Kross. Karrion Kross has had one of the worst WWE careers in WWE history, right? So, commensurate with what I just said, the match starts, right? There's a part of the match where Kofi Kingston does the trust fall dive from the top turnbuckle to the outside, and Akam fails at picking him up, right? Now, or at intercepting him, right? So Kofi Kingston takes this massive bump, but this takes out Akam. So now we have Rezar in the ring with Xavier. So it's like Rezar doesn't even have a finishing move, so you know at this point that Xavier is going to win, right? But obviously Akam and Rezar are two legit badasses. Akam is like from Canada, and he could have been in the Olympics for wrestling. And Rezar is a legit MMA fighter, the Albanian psychopath Rezar. These guys are just legit motherfucks. Like, if they wanted to, they could beat the shit out of like Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston in seconds, right? So this was a little bit silly, but it is a New Day match. Xavier Woods does his few little moves. Eventually, he wins with a small package. But it's just a win. It's a meaningless win, right? Because what happens is, after the match, he gets destroyed by the Final Testament, right? Then, Odyssey Jones. Now, Odyssey Jones is someone that was drafted to Raw like 3 years ago, and he's never done anything with his career. But he comes in there, right? And this was another, basically, Bronson Reed moment, if you ask me. He just comes out there, and he's just beating the shit out of these two, like, legit dudes. Now, again, obviously, Rezar and Akam would destroy Odyssey Jones in a fight, because they're legit athletes, right? But nevertheless, Odyssey Jones is big enough where this makes sense, right? There's a point in the match where Odyssey Jones does a legit double sidewalk slam on AOP, motherfucks. He picks up Rezar with one arm, holds him there, then he picks up Akam with just the other arm, right? And he double sidewalk slams these motherfucks. Together, these guys are easily over 550 pounds, right? They are massive men. And Odyssey Jones just picked them up like it was nothing, right? Also of note, after the match, the New Day is talking, and basically the storyline is Odyssey Jones befriended Kofi Kingston at the Performance Center, right? And clearly Xavier Woods is like, oh, like that's a little bit weird, like, so I don't know, you guys were friends. Basically, he's feeling left out, right? So this storyline continues. Then Tozawa and Alpha Academy come, and they do like a comedy segment where Tozawa starts dancing. It's really dumb. Then we have A-Town Down Under, who are supposed to be on SmackDown. They come and they wrestle Miz and R-Truth. Long story short, R-Truth becomes retarded and costs Miz and R-Truth the match, right? R-Truth takes the A-Town down after Miz pretty much dominates the match. R-Truth makes a meaningless tag, comes in there, does the AA, and then eventually gets destroyed by Austin Theory with the A-Town down, right? And now it's time for what should have been the main event, right? Damian Priest versus JD McDonough. This should have been the main event, not because of JD McDonough, obviously, not even because of Damian Priest, but because of the overall storyline. The entire storyline here is that Damian Priest is head and shoulders above JD. He is superior to him, right? So JD winning this match would be an enormous upset, right? Notable moments from the match include a situation where Damian gets JD by the throat and goes for the South of Heaven. JD flips and basically, when he flips, Damian falls on his back and he just pretty much falls down and just headbutts Damian Priest, right? This was like a pretty cool spot, but also because JD McDonough's head is about 50% bigger than it should be, this was presented as this like massive headbutt, right? Then JD goes to the top rope and does a perfect moonsault. This was one of the best moonsaults of all time. Right there with Kurt Angle's best, right? Like, if you compare this moonsault to Io Shirai's or Io Sky's moonsault, not even close. He does a perfect moonsault, but of course, Damian Priest kicks out as he should, right? Then the match continues, and long story short, Damian Priest hits a few cool moves. He does the lifting reverse STO, like the lifting complete shot. He does a few kick and elbow combos. He does like you know, the Stinger Splash elbow into the corner, and then eventually he hits the South of Heaven, or I think he's about to hit the South of Heaven, or maybe he does, I don't remember. But he does a move, and he's about to pin JD McDonough, right? Then he gets attacked by Finn Balor, who didn't wait until until Damian forgot about him, but that's fine, you know. He gets attacked, Dominic comes out, Dominic, and Carlito's been there the whole time. So they're whooping his ass, right? But Damian Priest is built different, so he starts whooping their ass back, right? And at this point, he takes out the rest of the Judgment Day except for Finn Balor. They're face to face. Finn tries to run. Damian grabs him, puts him up for the Razor's Edge, but Liv Morgan pulls Finn Balor, because she's still there. She pulls Finn Balor and gets in Damian's face, right? Because Damian Priest would never hit a lady, you know? And that's when, of course, obviously, Rhea Ripley comes out. Dominic and Liv start running away, but they are caught by Rhea Ripley. Rhea Ripley says she's going to powerbomb Liv Morgan through the announce table. She's about to go for it, but predictably, when she lifts her up, Dominic saves her, right? But she goes back in the ring, and JD is trying to beat on Damian Priest some more. A post-match beatdown, right? JD McDonough turns around, boom, Glasgow kiss by Rhea Ripley. He turns around, and Damian Priest hits a massive South of Heaven, right? This match really showed that JD McDonough, there's something there in the sense that he can be a good jobber, right? Like, he just jumped so high. This guy is like low-key extremely athletic. He jumped so high and he made the South of Heaven look like the biggest chokeslam of all time, right? He does that, Damian and Rhea celebrate and they hug. This was a good moment, right? This was a good moment of the people that were betrayed coming together and beating up the people that betrayed them, right? They get the upper hand now. That's why this should have been the main event, but it wasn't, Cucks. The main event was a six-man tag team match. Gable and the Creed brothers, which are now called American Made, I think. I think it's called American Made. I don't remember. Michael Cole said it a few times. Versus the Wyatt Six. The Wyatt Six come out. It's a boring, overproduced entrance, and you remember the type of jobbers these guys are, right? They show up, and they're wrestling and wrestling and wrestling. Nothing happens. This whole match just felt like a tribute to Bray Wyatt, which would normally be a good thing, but it's not a good thing because they can't do this every week. They can't do a tribute to Bray Wyatt every week. That's going to get boring. That's going to get boring by next week, right? I mean, they probably won't wrestle next week. We're probably going to see some more cryptic promos. But the match, I didn't like it at all. And it really establishes, in my opinion, the status of the Wyatt Six as extreme jobbers, right? Extreme jobbers. Why? Because they had a competitive, like, 20-minute match against, you know, I mean, I like Chad Gable and I like the Creeds as well, but they are jobbers. They are undercard wrestlers. They're not pay-per-view wrestlers. So with all that being said, they're not even undercard wrestlers. They're like TV wrestlers, right? There should be a new category because the undercard could be something like A-Town Down Under versus like Miz and R-Truth. You could see that on pay-per-view conceivably, right? But you're not going to see like the Creed brothers and Chad Gable on pay-per-view really, right? So with that being said, the match was pretty boring. It ends in the following manner. Basically, after like American-made get the upper hand, they're beating on everybody. Joe Gacy does the little springboard clothesline thing he does, but he does it like a double. He tags in Rowan. Rowan comes in. He's not good in the ring, you know what I'm saying? Rowan comes in, does a few moves. He does the yeah as a tribute to Luke Harper, and then does like a senton, right? But he like barely makes it, right? Like he just jumps over the top rope and rolls basically, right? He should have just done the Luke Harper clothesline. You know, that should just be his finisher. You know, just make that your finisher. You don't need the claw slam, which is ridiculous. The clothesline is a perfectly acceptable finisher for Eric Rowan, especially considering that it was Bray Wyatt's finisher, right? He can't do the Sister Abigail because Bo Dallas is going to do that one, right? So there you have it, cuckolds. Now, with that being said, he does the claw slam, tags in Huskus. Huskus tags in Loomis, and basically they do the little powerbomb thing where Loomis runs against the rope, pop a powerbomb by Gacy onto, I think it was Chad Gable, right? And then Dex Loomis goes up to the top rope, and I'm like, oh, cool, time for a new move. No, he just does a top rope shitty looking splash, and Eric Rowan just kind of pushes him down a little bit, and they win with that splash. Then Uncle Howdy goes, ha ha ha, and their music plays, and the show ends as Michael Cole tells us that Raw will never be the same again. You're right, it will never be the same again because you're never going to see these guys in the main event ever again. You know what I'm saying? Mark my words, motherfucks. Maybe Uncle Howdy might have a main event match on Raw, but this is the beginning of the end for these assholes. I made another video today that I didn't get to post yet, so I'll probably post that tomorrow. But in that video, I explained that I predicted that 6 months after their in-ring debut, it's over for them, right? Now, I don't know if I want the clock to start ticking yet because, like, technically, you know, Uncle Howdy needs to debut because if they push his debut to, like, the Royal Rumble, you know what I mean? And then he debuts there in a meaningless match against, like, LA Knight or something and wins the title, right? Then the clock needs to start again at 6 months. But if he wrestles soon, then it's over. As soon as he wrestles 6 months after that, they'll be jobbers, mark my words. So, with all that being said, this Raw had a bunch of shit moments. The Gunther and Randy Orton moment was complete garbage. The main event was complete garbage. All the segments that involved the Damage Control and the Sonya Deville group, which I don't think has a name yet, those were all shit. And the only two segments that stood out, but that were good, right? 2.5, I'll say 2.5 segments. The Odyssey Jones situation, I'll call that a half a segment. For what it was excellent. And the Bronson Reed segment, which in my opinion was the highlight of the night, that was fantastic. And, you know, with that, I'll consider the entire segment. The Drew McIntyre, you know, Seth Rollins thing, that was just interesting, right? Because it answered questions, right? It answered primarily the question of what's next for these three cocksuckers, right? Well, obviously, McIntyre and CM Punk are going to continue to wrestle. And Seth Rollins is now going to be in a program with Bronson Reed. So it answered that. That segment was good. There's another good segment, wasn't there? I'm trying to think, Cucks. Maybe that was it. But that segment was really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Everything else, in my opinion, the Judgment Day segment. The Judgment Day segment and the match that accompanied it was excellent, right? I look forward to seeing what happens next with the Judgment Day. But the one thing I will say is that this segment did feel like the end of it, right? It just felt like it's over now. You know what I mean? Like, of course, Judgment Day is going to continue to do Judgment Day shit. But at the end of the day, right, it's like the chapter is closed. You know what I mean? Like, the chapter of the Judgment Day is closed, meaning that Rhea Ripley is going to go after Liv Morgan and finish her story with Dominic. But it seems like this will be disconnected from the separate story that, Damian Priest is going to have against Finn Balor. Sure, we might see some sort of mixed tag team match, right? Because like Rhea Ripley needs someone to be her partner when she inevitably gets her hands on Dominic, right? That feud's going to end with her hitting the Riptide on Dominic. We all know it. So, she needs a guy, and that guy is Damian Priest. But the association between Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley is now going to be much looser, right? They're just like these kind of allies. And I don't think they'll be doing much together until the Judgment Day reforms at some point in the future, Because now they're in that category of, I don't want to say legendary faction, but they're in a long-term faction. So it's like, a reunion is going to be around the corner at some point. Now, with all that being said, I give this Raw, and I'll give it a 9 out of 10, right? But, of course, by modern standards. If we were to grade it against any other Raw from the Attitude Era, it would be like a 3, right? But this is a 9 out of 10 in the contemporary Raw standards, right? That's how bad Raw is. Even in the contemporary standards, generally you expect a 2 out of 10. Everything's falling apart still, don't get me wrong. But this episode, did a few things that were exciting and felt like good wrestling moments, right? The Judgment Day segment, the entire situation there felt like a fresh and Attitude Era-esque moment, right? As did the debuts of, I'm going to call them debuts because that's how they feel, Odyssey Jones and Bronson Reed, right? These people may as well just started debuting today, and now Bronson Reed is a legit mid-carder already. That's all it takes is one segment. So I look forward to what they're going to do next. I'm going to watch Raw next week for sure. SmackDown, of course, I have to watch it because Roman Reigns is coming back. So I'll see you guys then. I mean, obviously in the meantime, I'll do more videos, but you get what I'm saying. Cuckolds!